Close your eyes and let your mind drift away from the present moment. Imagine the world before there were cities, before there were roads, and even before the sun and the stars had names. In the quiet of the night, it is easy to imagine a time when everything was still, waiting to begin. This is where the story of the Greek gods starts, not with a bang or a loud declaration, but with a deep, silent emptiness called chaos. Chaos was not a storm or a mess. It was simply a vast, dark space, like the air between the stars. It was a time of complete peace, where nothing had a shape and nothing had a weight. From this quiet darkness, the very first foundations of the world began to stir, as if waking up from a long, dreamless sleep. The first to emerge was Gaia, the earth. She was not just a goddess. She was the ground itself. Imagine the first feeling of solid land beneath your feet, the warmth of the soil, and the soft pulse of life waiting to grow. Gaia was the mother of everything we know. She was the mountains, the valleys, and the deep, hidden places where the world feels most solid. As Gaia rested, she brought forth the sky to cover her. This was Uranus. He was a vast, blue canopy by day and a glittering dark blanket by night. He surrounded Gaia on all sides, protecting her and watching over her. In those earliest days, the sky and the earth were always together, inseparable and calm. There was no wind yet, and no rain, just the silent earth and the endless, starlit sky. Together, Gaia and Uranus brought life to the world. But their first children were not like the gods we usually think of. They were the Titans. These were beings of immense scale, as tall as the clouds and as strong as the tides. They were the personifications of the world's natural forces. One Titan was the slow-moving river that circles the world. Another was the gentle light that fills the sky before the sun rises. They were patient and quiet, moving with the slow rhythm of the turning earth. Among these Titans was one named Cronus. He was the youngest, but he was also the most ambitious. He felt the weight of the sky above him and the stillness of the earth below, and he wanted to see what would happen if the world began to change. Under his influence, the world started to move a little faster. Time began to flow, no longer standing still in a single moment. Cronus became the ruler of this new age. This period is often called the Golden Age. It was a time when the world was always in a state of eternal spring. There was no hunger, no cold, and no need for hard work. The rivers flowed with honey and milk, and the trees were always heavy with fruit. People lived long, peaceful lives, and when they finally grew tired, they simply fell into a deep, pleasant sleep and became gentle spirits that watched over the living. It was a time of absolute harmony. There were no wars and no arguments. The gods and the people lived in a shared dream. You can almost feel the warmth of that golden sun on your skin, the way it never burned, only comforted. The air always smelled of wildflowers and damp earth. However, even in this perfect world, Cronus felt a sense of unease. He had a premonition that his own children would one day surpass him, just as he had surpassed his father. This fear lived in the back of his mind, a small shadow in a world of light. To keep his powers safe, Cronus decided that he could not let his children grow up. His wife, Rhea, was a goddess of grace and motherhood. She loved the world they had built, but she felt a deep sadness as Cronus tried to stop the natural cycle of life. When her youngest son, Zeus, was born, Rhea knew she had to do something different. She wanted her child to see the beauty of the world for himself. In the middle of the night, under the cover of the silent stars, Rhea took the infant Zeus to a hidden cave on a high mountain. The cave was cool and quiet, tucked away behind thick vines and ancient stones. She left him there in the care of gentle mountain spirits and a magical goat who provided him with everything he needed. To fool Cronus, Rhea wrapped a large stone in baby blankets and gave it to him instead. Cronus, blinded by his own worry, didn't notice the difference. While the rest of the world continued its slow, golden existence, Zeus grew up in the secret shadows of the mountain. He spent his days listening to the wind whistling through the peaks and the sound of water dripping from the cave ceiling. He learned the language of the birds and the way the clouds moved across the horizon. He was a child of the wild, untouched by the worries of the palace. As Zeus grew stronger, he began to understand his place in the world. He wasn't just a child of the Titans. He was the beginning of something new. He represented the spark of a flame, the sudden crack of thunder, and the clear light of reason. He was the bridge between the old world of the Titans and the new world of the gods. Eventually, the time came for Zeus to leave his mountain home. He did not return with anger, but with a plan to bring balance back to his family. With the help of a wise goddess who knew the secrets of herbs and plants, he created a special drink for his father. When Cronus drank it, he felt a great change within him. One by one, he released the children he had tried to hide away, Zeus's brothers and sisters. They emerged not as infants, but as fully grown gods, each with their own unique spirit. There was Hera, with eyes as clear as the morning sky. There was Poseidon, who carried the rhythm of the deep ocean in his heart. There was Hades, who understood the quiet peace of the earth's depths. And there were Hestia and Demeter, who brought the warmth of the hearth and the richness of the harvest. The Titans looked at these new gods and realized that the world was changing. The long silent golden age was coming to an end, and a new era was beginning. It wasn't a sudden break, but a slow transition, like the way the stars fade when the sun begins to rise. The new gods made their home on the highest peak they could find, a place where the air was thin and pure, and the view stretched out over the entire world. They called it Mount Olympus. From this height, they could watch over the forests, the oceans, and the homes of people. They weren't distant or cold. They were part of the world, woven into the very fabric of the wind and the trees. Imagine standing on that mountain peak now. The air is perfectly still. Below you, the world is a tapestry of deep greens and soft blues. You can see the silver threads of rivers winding through the valleys and the gentle curve of the sea meeting the shore. Everything is in its place. The struggle of the past is over, and a new, calm order has been established. The gods took their seats in a great hall made of marble and light. They weren't interested in the heavy, slow movements of the Titans. They were interested in the details of life. They watched the way a flower opens in the morning and the way a fire flickers in a dark room. They became the guardians of the small things as well as the great. Hestia sat by the central fire, her presence ensuring that every home felt safe and warm. Demeter walked through the fields, whispering to the grain to grow tall and strong. Poseidon found his home in the coral caves of the sea, guiding the currents and watching over the creatures of the deep. Zeus sat on his throne, not as a tyrant, but as a watcher. He held the lightning in his hand, but he only used it to clear the air after a long, hot day. He was the balance that kept the sky and the earth in harmony. The world was no longer just a vast, empty space or an eternal, unchanging garden. It was a place of seasons, of growth, and of stories. As the stars begin to wheel overhead in their familiar patterns, remember that these stories were told to explain the very things you feel tonight. The coolness of the air, the solidity of the ground, and the deep, enduring silence of the night. The ancients believed that the gods were all around them, in the rustle of the leaves and the glow of the moon. Welcome back to this quiet space. Take a deep breath and settle into your blankets. Let your shoulders relax and your mind soften. We are returning to the high cloud-brushed peaks of Mount Olympus. In our last story, we saw how the world began in silence and how the young gods found their place above the clouds. Tonight, we will walk through the halls of their palace and meet the Olympians one by one, not as distant legends, but as the quiet forces that move through the world while we sleep. The air on Olympus is always perfect. It is never too hot or too cold. A gentle breeze carries the scent of wild thyme and mountain lilies through the open marble archways. Everything here is made of light and stone. The floors are polished like the surface of a still lake, reflecting the stars above. It is a place of absolute peace, far above the worries of the world below. In the very center of this palace lives Hestia. She is perhaps the most important of all, though she rarely speaks in the old stories. Hestia is the goddess of the hearth and the home. She tends the eternal fire that burns in the middle of the great hall. Imagine a low glowing fire that never goes out. It doesn't roar or crackle loudly. It simply pulses with a warm, golden light. Hestia sits beside it, her presence making the vast palace feel cozy and safe. She represents the feeling of coming home after a long journey. Whenever you feel the warmth of a soft blanket or the comfort of a quiet room, that is the spirit of Hestia. Near the central fire, we find Hera. She sits on a throne of ivory, watching over the world with steady, knowing eyes. Hera is the queen of the gods, the guardian of families, and the quiet bonds that hold people together. She is often associated with the peacock, and if you look closely at her robes, they seem to shimmer with the same deep blues and greens of a peacock's feathers. She is the steady hand that brings order to the chaos. Her voice is like the sound of a deep bell, resonant and calming. She reminds us that there is a structure to the world, and that we are all part of a larger family. Moving away from the center of the hall, we hear a sound like the distant hum of a beehive or the rustle of wind through a wheat field. This is the space held by Demeter. She is the goddess of the harvest and the changing seasons. Demeter doesn't spend all her time on the mountain peak. She loves the feel of the soil between her fingers. She is the reason the grass grows green in the spring and the leaves turn gold in the autumn. When you see a field of grain waving slowly in the breeze, you are seeing Demeter at work. She teaches us about patience, the way a seed must wait in the dark earth before it can reach for the sun. Her energy is maternal and grounding, like the smell of rain on dry earth. If we walk to the edge of the palace gardens and look out toward the horizon, we see the vast, shimmering expanse of the Mediterranean Sea. This is the realm of Poseidon. While he has a throne on Olympus, he is often found in his own palace, deep beneath the waves. Poseidon is the god of the ocean, but also of earthquakes and horses. Think of the rhythm of the tide, the way the water slides up the sand and then retreats with a soft, shushing sound. That is the breath of Poseidon. He can be powerful, yes, but he is also the source of that deep, blue stillness we feel when we sit by the shore. He reminds us that there are depths within us all, as vast and mysterious as the sea itself. High above the sea, moving through the air with the grace of a bird, is Hermes. He is the messenger, the one who travels between the world of the gods and the world of humans. Hermes wears sandals with small golden wings that allow him to glide silently through the night. He is the god of travelers, of borders, and of sleep itself. It is said that Hermes carries a wand that can bring sleep to the weary or wake those who are dreaming. He is a friend to the wanderer and the storyteller. His energy is light and quick, like a thought that crosses your mind just before you fall asleep. He is the bridge between what is known and what is hidden, in a quiet corner of the palace. Surrounded by the soft glow of a forge, is Hephaestus. He is the craftsman, the god of fire and stone. While the other gods might spend their time in thought or travel, Hephaestus finds peace in making things. He works with his hands, shaping gold and iron into beautiful objects. The sound of his forge is not a loud clanging, but a rhythmic, soothing thud, like a heartbeat. Hephaestus teaches us the beauty of creation and the value of hard work. He reminds us that even in the heat and the fire, something wonderful can be formed. Then there is Athena. She often sits quietly, lost in thought, with an owl perched on her shoulder. Athena is the goddess of wisdom and clear thinking. She doesn't rush into things. She watches, she listens, and she understands. Her wisdom is not found in dusty books, but in the ability to stay calm when things are uncertain. She is the inventor of the loom and the olive tree. when you find a clever solution to a problem, or when you feel a sudden sense of clarity. That is the influence of Athena. She is the cool moonlight that helps us see the path through the woods. Not far away, we might hear the faint, beautiful notes of a lyre. This is Apollo, the god of light, music, and healing. Apollo is like the first rays of the sun hitting a mountain peak. He brings harmony to the world. His music is said to be so beautiful that it can make the trees dance and the stones weep. But more than that, Apollo is a healer. He understands the balance of the body and the mind. His presence is like a warm light that chases away the shadows of worry. He encourages us to find the melody in our own lives. His twin sister, Artemis, is his opposite in many ways. While Apollo loves the sun, Artemis loves the moon. She is the goddess of the wilderness and the hunt. You can imagine her moving silently through a silver-lit forest, her footsteps making no sound on the moss. She protects the wild animals and the quiet, untouched places of the earth. Artemis is the spirit of independence and the strength we find when we are alone with nature. She reminds us to respect the wild parts of the world and the wild parts of ourselves. We must also mention Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty. She did not come from the mountains, but from the sea foam, drifting to the shore on a seashell. Aphrodite is the feeling of warmth in your heart when you see something beautiful. She is the softness of a rose petal and the sparkle in a loved one's eye. Her presence reminds us that the world is not just a place of survival, but a place of joy and connection. She brings a sense of grace to the halls of Olympus, a reminder that kindness is its own kind of power. Finally, we look to Zeus, who sits upon the highest throne of all. He is the king, the father of gods and humans. He holds the sky in his hands. Zeus is the one who ensures that the sun rises every morning and that the stars find their way home every night. He is the ultimate guardian of justice and hospitality. Under his watch, the world remains in balance. When you hear the distant roll of thunder on a summer afternoon, it is a reminder that there is a great, steady power watching over everything, keeping the world safe and orderly. All these gods, with their different strengths and stories, live together in the quiet heights of Olympus. They are not just characters from a book. They are symbols of the forces we feel every day. The warmth of the fire, the rhythm of the sea, the wisdom of a quiet moment, and the beauty of the stars as you lie here in the stillness. Imagine you are looking up at that mountain. The white marble of the palace glows softly under the moon. The gods are at peace. The fire of Hestia is a low ember glow. The music of Apollo has faded into a gentle hum. The world below is tucked in for the night, protected by the watchful eyes of those who live above the clouds. The air is cool. The room is dark. There is nothing left for you to do but drift. The stories of the ancients are like a soft blanket, wrapping around you and carrying you toward a deep, dreamless rest. The mountain is silent. The sea is calm. The gods are resting, and so can you. Tonight, as the world settles into its nightly rest, we step back from the bright halls of the Olympian gods. We are moving deeper into the past, to a time before the white marble palaces were built, to a time when the world was much larger and felt a little more mysterious. We are going to visit the Titans and the ancient beings who existed when the earth was still cooling and the first forests were just beginning to stretch toward the light. These are the giants of the world, the old roots of the family tree. The Titans were not like the gods we imagine today. They didn't have human worries or human faces. Instead, they were more like the elements themselves. Think of the way a mountain feels when you stand at its base, or the way the deep ocean seems to go on forever. That was the essence of a Titan. They were the vast, slow-moving forces of nature that existed long before the first spark of human fire. One of the most peaceful of these ancient beings was Ocean. He was the eldest of the Titans, and he did not live on a mountain or in a city. He was the river that flowed around the very edge of the world. In the minds of the ancients, the earth was a flat disk, and Oceanus was the endless circle of water that embraced it all. Imagine a river so wide you cannot see the other side, moving with a constant, rhythmic flow. There are no waves here, no storms, just a deep and eternal current. Oceanus was the father of all the smaller rivers and springs. Every time you hear the sound of a creek bubbling over stones, or a fountain in a quiet courtyard, you are hearing a tiny echo of that original, ancient river. Living alongside Oceanus was his sister Tethys. She was the goddess of the fresh water that nourishes the earth from below. While Oceanus was the great circle on the outside, Tethys was the lifeblood on the inside. She was the moisture in the soil that helps the trees grow, and the cool water that hides in deep, dark wells. Together, they represent a world that is perfectly hydrated and balanced. There is something deeply comforting about the thought of these two ancient beings, quietly tending to the waters of the world while the rest of the universe was still finding its shape. Then there were the Titans of the light. Long before Apollo drove his sun chariot across the sky, there was Hyperion. He was the Titan of observation and the first light of heaven. His name means the one who moves above. He wasn't the sun itself, but the golden glow that exists before the sun rises. Imagine that soft, pale light of early morning when the world is still blue and gray, and the first hint of gold starts to touch the tops of the trees. That was the presence of Hyperion. He was the father of the sun, the moon, and the dawn. He represents the simple act of looking and seeing, the clarity that comes when the darkness begins to lift. His wife was Theia, the goddess of sight and the blue sky. She was also responsible for the value we find in precious things. The ancients believed that gold and silver glowed because a little bit of Theia's light was trapped inside them. When you see a gemstone sparkle or the sun reflecting off a window, that is the legacy of this ancient titan. She taught the world how to appreciate beauty and how to value the things that shine. We also find Nemesis, whose name is a bit difficult to say, but whose role is very simple. She was the titan of memory. Before there were books or writing, memory was the only way the world's stories survived. Mnemosyne was like a vast library of everything that had ever happened. She knew the names of every star and the history of every mountain. She was the mother of the muses, the spirits who inspire music and poetry. Without memory, there can be no art and no stories. She is the quiet voice in the back of your mind that reminds you of a childhood summer or the scent of a kitchen from long ago. She is the bridge between the past and the present, keeping the thread of history from breaking. In the center of the world stood Themis. She was the goddess of divine order and law, but she didn't deal with the laws of humans. She dealt with the laws of nature. She was the one who made sure the seasons followed one another in the right order. She made sure the rain fell when the earth was dry, and that the night always followed the day. Themis sat on a simple stone throne, watching the world with a calm and impartial gaze. She represents the feeling of fairness and the underlying structure of the universe. When you feel that the world is working exactly as it should, you are feeling the steady influence of Themis. Perhaps the most famous of these ancient ones is Prometheus. Though he was a younger titan, he stayed behind when the others faded away. Prometheus was the one who looked at the early humans and felt a great sense of compassion. He saw them shivering in the dark and decided to give them a gift. He climbed to the hearth of the gods and stole a single spark of fire, hiding it in the hollow stalk of a fennel plant. He brought this fire down to the people, teaching them how to cook, how to stay warm, and how to forge tools. This gift of fire was more than just heat. It was the gift of civilization and thought. Prometheus represents the spark of curiosity and the desire to make the world a better place for those who come after us. His brother, Epimetheus, was very different. While Prometheus always looked forward, Epimetheus always looked backward. His name means afterthought. He was the one who lived in the moment, sometimes making mistakes, but always learning from them later. He was the one who accepted the first woman, Pandora, into the world. While we often hear about Pandora's box, the older stories suggest it was actually a large clay jar, used for storing grain or wine. When the jar was opened, the troubles of the world flew out, but at the very bottom, there was one thing left: hope. Epimetheus and Pandora remind us that even when things are difficult, hope is something we can always hold on to. Then there is Atlas. He is often pictured as a strong man, kneeling under the weight of a giant stone ball. But in the oldest stories, he wasn't holding up the earth. He was holding up the sky. He stood at the very western edge of the world, where the sun sets into the ocean. His job was to keep the heavens and the earth apart, so that the world would have room to breathe. Imagine the strength and the patience it would take to stand still for eternity, feeling the weight of the stars and the clouds on your shoulders. Atlas represents endurance. He is the mountain that never moves, the pillar that holds everything together while we sleep safely below. As we move through these stories, the world starts to feel very old and very sturdy. These ancient beings aren't gone. They have simply become the background of our lives. The Titans are the mountains we climb, the oceans we swim in, and the memories we carry. They are the slow pulse of the planet itself. As you drift closer to sleep, imagine the world as it was then, a place of deep shadows and soft, ancient light. There are no machines, no clocks, no lights from the city. There is only the sound of Oceanus flowing at the edge of the world, and the steady breath of Atlas holding up the night sky. The air is cool and heavy, with the scent of ancient moss and stone. The great cycle of the world continues, just as Themis intended. The memory of the past is safe with Mnemosyne. The fire of Prometheus is glowing low in the hearth. You are part of this long, unbroken story. You are safe in the arms of the earth, protected by the ancient laws that have governed the stars since the very beginning. The light of Hyperion has faded, leaving only the soft glow of the moon. The world is quiet. The Titans are still. There is nothing left to do but let your thoughts go, moving like a leaf on the slow river of Oceanus, drifting toward the edge of the world where dreams begin. We have traveled through the void of the beginning, climbed the peaks of Olympus, and felt the ancient weight of the Titans. Tonight, as the house grows still and the world outside softens into shadows, we are going to walk through a few of the most famous stories ever told. These are the myths that have been whispered around fires for thousands of years. They are stories of love, of the seasons, and of the quiet magic that the ancients saw in the natural world. Take a moment to adjust your pillow. Make sure your blankets are exactly as you like them. As you settle in, imagine we are sitting on a soft, grassy hillside in ancient Greece. The air is warm and smells of wild rosemary. Below us, the sea is a dark, shimmering blue, and the stars are just beginning to wake up. The first story we will visit is one of the most beautiful and bittersweet. It explains why the world changes from the warmth of summer to the quiet chill of winter. It begins with Demeter, whom we met before, the goddess of the harvest. She had a daughter named Persephone, who was the very essence of springtime. Wherever Persephone walked, flowers bloomed under her feet, and the air felt light and hopeful. One day, while Persephone was gathering flowers in a sun-drenched meadow, the ground opened up, and she was taken down to the underworld by Hades. Hades was not a cruel god, but he was lonely in his silent, golden palace beneath the earth. He wanted a queen to share his realm, and he chose Persephone. When Demeter found her daughter gone, her grief was so deep that the world began to change. She stopped tending to the crops. The green leaves turned brown and fell from the trees. The ground became hard and cold. This was the very first winter. The gods on Olympus realized that the world could not survive without the harvest. So they made a deal. Because Persephone had eaten a few seeds of a pomegranate while she was in the underworld, she was tied to that place. It was decided that for part of the year, She would stay with Hades as his queen, and for the rest of the year, she would return to her mother on the surface. When Persephone returns to the sunlight, Demeter's joy is so great that the earth blooms once more. This is spring and summer. But when the time comes for her to descend back into the quiet earth, Demeter mourns, and the world goes to sleep. This story reminds us that life is a circle. There is a time for growth and a time for rest, and both are necessary as we think of the earth resting. We can turn our minds to another story, one about a man named Orpheus. He was the greatest musician to ever live. It was said that when he played his lyre, even the stones would move to get closer to the music. Orpheus loved a woman named Eurydice with all his heart. When she passed away, his grief was so loud that the gods themselves wept. Orpheus decided to do something no one had ever done. He walked down into the underworld, using only his music to open the gates. He played for the ferrymen on the river, and he played for the three-headed dog that guarded the entrance. Finally, he reached the throne of Hades and Persephone. He played a song so beautiful and so sad that even the king of the dead felt a tear move down his cheek. Hades agreed to let Eurydice return to the world of the living, but on one condition. Orpheus had to walk back up to the light, and Eurydice would follow behind him. He must not look back at her until they were both safely under the sun. They walked for a long time through the silent, winding tunnels. Orpheus could hear the soft sound of her footsteps, but as they neared the exit, he began to worry. Was she really there? Was it a trick? Just as he stepped into the first ray of sunlight, he couldn't help himself. He turned around. He saw her for a fleeting second, a beautiful shadow in the darkness, before she was pulled back into the quiet depths. It is a sad story, but it is also a story about the power of music and the depth of human love. It teaches us that some things are meant to remain in the realm of mystery, and that we must trust the path we are on, even when we cannot see what is behind us now. Let us move to a story that is a bit lighter, like a warm breeze. It is the story of Pegasus, the winged horse. Pegasus was born from the foam of the sea and the magic of the ancient world. He was pure white, with wings as wide as a cloud. Pegasus lived on the mountain peaks and spent his days flying between the earth and the stars. He was a wild creature, but he was also gentle. One day a young man named Bellerophon wanted to tame him. To do this, he didn't use a rope or a cage. He was given a golden bridle by the goddess Athena. When he approached the winged horse by a quiet spring, Pegasus saw the light of the gold and the kindness in the man's eyes, and he allowed himself to be ridden. Together, they flew over the mountains and the oceans. Imagine the feeling of being on the back of a great white horse, soaring through the cool, thin air of the upper sky. The world below looks like a tiny map of green and blue. There is no sound but the rushing of the wind and the steady beat of powerful wings. Eventually, Pegasus went to live in the stables of Zeus on Mount Olympus, where he carried the lightning bolts for the king of the gods. Even now, if you look up at the night sky, you can see a square of stars that bears his name. He is a reminder of the freedom and the wonder that exists just beyond our reach. Our final story for tonight is the myth of Echo and Narcissus. It is a story about the sounds of the world. Echo was a forest spirit who loved to talk, but she was cursed so that she could never speak her own words again. She could only repeat the last few words that someone else said. She spent her days wandering the deep woods, hidden behind the trees. One day, she saw a young man named Narcissus. He was incredibly beautiful, but he was also very lonely, though he didn't know it. He stopped by a pool of water that was as clear as a mirror. The surface was so still that not even a leaf disturbed it. When he looked down, he saw his own reflection, but he didn't realize it was himself. He thought he had found a beautiful spirit living in the water. He stayed by the pool for a long time, mesmerized by the image. Echo watched him from the shadows, repeating his sighs of admiration. Eventually, Narcissus faded away, leaving only a beautiful white and gold flower by the water's edge. The flower we now call the narcissus. Echo remained in the mountains and the caves. Even today, if you shout into a deep valley, she is there, waiting to catch your words and send them back to you. It is a story about the way we see ourselves and the way the world reflects us back. It is a quiet, contemplative myth that fits the stillness of the forest. These stories were the way the ancients made sense of the world. They saw a flower and thought of a young man by a pool. They heard an echo and thought of a lonely spirit. They watched the leaves fall and thought of a mother's love for her daughter. To them, the world was alive with meaning. Every tree, every stream, and every star had a name and a history. As you lie here, feel the weight of these ancient tales. They are like old friends, familiar and steady. They don't require you to do anything. They don't ask for your attention. They simply exist, like the constellations in the sky. The meadow where Persephone gathered flowers is now dark and quiet under the moon. The river where Orpheus played his lyre is flowing softly toward the sea. The wings of Pegasus are folded as he rests in the celestial stables. The world is tucked away, safe in the folds of time. Listen to the silence of your room. It is the same silence that Echo inhabits in her mountain caves. It is a peaceful, protective silence. The stories are finished for now, but they will be here whenever you need them. The gods and the heroes are all resting. The sun is far away on the other side of the world, and the moon is keeping watch. Let your breath become slow and regular. Feel the coolness of the air on your face. You are part of the great tapestry of history and myth. You are safe, you are warm, and you are exactly where you need to be. The fire in the hearth has settled into a soft, amber glow, and the world outside has grown still. Tonight, we return once more to the ancient lands of Greece, where the line between the earth and the heavens was often blurred. We have spoken of the great gods who sat upon their golden thrones, and the titans who came before them. But tonight, our journey takes us to those who walked the dusty paths of the world, carrying the blood of both mortals and immortals in their veins. These were the heroes and the demigods, the ones who lived in the quiet space between the ordinary and the divine. To understand these figures, one must imagine a time when the gods were not distant concepts, but active forces in the world. Sometimes, a god would look down from the clouds and find themselves drawn to the grace or the spirit of a human. From these unions, children were born who were not quite gods, yet were never truly at home among common men. They were gifted with a strength that felt like the tide, or a wisdom that seemed to echo the wind, but they also carried the weight of mortality. They knew the world was fleeting, and perhaps that is why their stories have lingered for so long in the quiet corners of our minds. Think first of Perseus. Long ago, he was a young man sent on a journey that felt more like a dream than a task. He did not go with a heavy heart, but with a quiet determination. The gods watched over him, lending him tools that felt as light as air. He wore sandals with wings that allowed him to glide above the waves, the salt spray never touching his feet. He carried a shield so polished it reflected the world like a still mountain lake. His journey took him to the very edge of the map, where the sun sets and the shadows grow long. There, he moved through the mist, guided not by anger, but by a need to protect those he loved. When his work was done, he did not seek a throne. He simply flew back across the sea, a lone figure against the twilight, eventually finding his place among the stars, where he still rests today. Then there was Heracles, perhaps the most famous of them all. We often think of him as a man of immense power, but if we sit quietly and listen to his story, we find a soul searching for peace. His life was a series of long walks and heavy burdens. He traveled to the ends of the earth, not because he wanted glory, but because he was seeking a way to make things right. He wrestled with lions and outsmarted ancient creatures, yet his greatest strength was his endurance. There is a story of him holding up the entire sky for a moment, feeling the weight of every star and every cloud upon his shoulders. Can you imagine the silence of that moment? The vast, cold expanse of the universe resting on one man's strength while the rest of the world slept. He eventually grew tired of the struggle, and the gods finally brought him home to the high peaks, where the air is thin and the noise of the world cannot reach. In the winding streets of ancient cities, they told stories of Theseus. He was a hero of the mind as much as the hand. He volunteered to enter a great labyrinth, a place of endless stone hallways and shifting shadows. But he did not go in with a sword drawn in fear. He went in holding a simple ball of thread, a gift of kindness from someone who believed in him. As he walked deeper into the darkness, the thread unspooled behind him, a thin silver connection to the light of the outside world. He moved through the silence of the stone corridors, facing the unknown with a steady pulse. When he emerged, he followed that same thread back to the sun, proving that sometimes the greatest victories are won by simply finding our way back home. There were others who reached for things that humans were never meant to touch. Bellerophon was a young man who found a horse with wings of pure white. Together, they rose higher than any bird had ever flown. They soared over the mountains, the world below becoming nothing more than a patchwork of green and blue. For a time, he lived in the clouds, breathing the air of the gods. It was a life of perfect stillness and endless horizon. Though he eventually returned to the earth, he never forgot the feeling of the wind against his face at the roof of the world. And we must not forget Orpheus, the hero who did not carry a weapon, but a lyre. His music was said to be so beautiful that the trees would lean in to listen, and the rivers would stop flowing just to catch a note. When he lost what he loved most, he did not use force to get it back. He simply sang. He walked down into the deepest shadows of the earth, and his song was so gentle, so full of the shared sorrow of all living things, that even the cold hearts of the underworld softened. He showed us that there is a power in vulnerability, and that a quiet voice can sometimes echo louder than a shout. These heroes were not perfect. They felt the same loneliness we feel, the same doubt, and the same exhaustion, but they walked their paths anyway. They lived in a world where a goddess might appear in the shimmer of a fountain, or a god might speak through the rustle of oak leaves. For them, the world was a place of constant wonder, where even the most difficult task was an opportunity to touch the divine as the ages passed. Their stories became the constellations we see when we look up on a clear night. When you see a cluster of stars flickering in the distance, you are looking at the remnants of their journeys. They are no longer running, no longer fighting, and no longer searching. They are part of the deep, velvet blue of the evening. The stories of the demigods remind us that there is something extraordinary within the ordinary. They lived between two worlds, much like we do when we drift between wakefulness and sleep. The ancient Greeks believed that when we sleep, we are closer to the gods, as our spirits wander through the same dreamscapes where the heroes once walked. The air in the room is cool now, and the stories have done their work. The great adventures of the past are nothing more than whispers now, fading like the ripples on a pond. The heroes have found their rest. The mountains of Greece are silent under the moonlight, and the olive groves are still. There is no more need for journeys or for tasks. The world is safe in the quiet of the night. The stars will continue their slow turn across the sky, watching over the earth as they have for thousands of years. Perseus, Heracles, and Orpheus are there, glowing softly in the dark, reminding us that every story eventually finds its ending in the peace of the stars. The breath slows, the mind grows heavy. The myths are just shadows now, dancing on the wall before they disappear into the velvet dark. Everything is as it should be. The world is at rest. The heroes are at peace. And you, too, can let go of the day. The house is quiet now, and the world outside has settled into that deep, rhythmic stillness that only comes late at night. Tonight, We reach the final chapter of our journey through the ancient world of Greece. We have walked with the gods on Olympus, felt the weight of the Titans' shadows, and followed the heroes on their long winding paths. But tonight, we are not looking at a specific character or a single battle. Instead, we are looking at the world itself, the way the ancients saw it, and what all these stories were meant to tell us as we drift toward sleep. To the people of that time, the world was not a collection of random events. Everything had a voice. Everything had a spirit. When they looked at the sea, they didn't just see salt and water. They saw a vast, living presence that could be calm and inviting one moment, and deep and mysterious the next. When the wind rustled through the long grass or the silver leaves of the olive trees, it wasn't just moving air. It was a message, a whisper from a hidden world that lived just behind the veil of what our eyes could see. Imagine standing on a hillside in ancient Greece as the sun begins to dip below the horizon. The sky turns a soft, dusty purple, and the air smells of wild thyme and warm stone. For the ancients, this wasn't just the end of a day. It was the goddess of the moon, moving her silver chariot across the sky, bringing a blanket of rest to a tired earth. There was a comfort in that thought, the idea that the night wasn't just darkness, but a purposeful, gentle presence, taking care of the world while humans slept. They believed the earth was a living being, a mother who provided everything needed for life. The mountains were her bones, and the rivers were her veins. When a spring bubbled up from the ground, it was seen as a gift, a place where the divine touched the physical world. People would sit by these springs and listen to the water, believing that if they were quiet enough, they might understand the ancient secrets of the earth. It was a world where magic didn't feel like something impossible. It felt like a natural part of the landscape, as real as the rain or the heat of the summer sun. These stories, these myths we have explored together, were not just entertainment. They were a way for people to make sense of the big, sometimes frightening questions of life. They wondered why the seasons changed, why the flowers died in the winter and returned in the spring. They told the story of a mother's grief and her joy, and in doing so, they turned the changing weather into a beautiful, repeating poem. It gave them a sense of order. It told them that, even in the coldest, darkest winter, the spring was already dreaming of its return. They used myths to understand the human heart, too. They saw that people could be brave and kind, but also proud and mistaken. By telling stories of gods who felt jealousy, or heroes who felt lonely, they realized that their own feelings were a part of something much larger. It made the individual feel less alone. If even a god could feel a sense of loss, then a person sitting in their small home by the fire could feel that their own life was connected to the great tapestry of the universe. There is a beautiful concept in their world about the fabric of fate. They imagined three sisters sitting in a quiet place, spinning, measuring, and cutting the threads of every life. It sounds like a heavy idea, but there is a peace in it. It suggests that our lives are not just a series of accidents. There is a pattern, even if we can't see it from where we stand. Like a great weaving, every thread has its place, and every color is necessary to complete the picture. It allowed them to accept the ups and worths of life with a bit more grace, knowing that the thread was being held by hands older than time itself. As we think about these things, we can see how the landscape of Greece shaped their minds. The jagged mountains created high, secluded places where one could feel close to the stars. The deep, blue bays of the sea suggested a world of hidden depths. The sunlight was so bright and clear that it seemed to illuminate the truth of things. Everything about their environment encouraged them to look closer, to listen better, and to imagine more. They also believed in the power of hospitality and the sacredness of the guest. They thought that any traveler knocking on their door might be a god in disguise, testing their kindness. Because of this, they treated every stranger with a quiet respect. It created a world where kindness was a duty, and every encounter had the potential to be something sacred. It's a gentle thought to hold on to that by simply being kind to one another. We are participating in something timeless and beautiful. The myths taught them about the importance of balance. They knew that light needed the dark, and that activity needed rest. They saw the world as a great scale that was always trying to find its center. When things went wrong, it was often because that balance had been tipped. Their stories were a way of reminding themselves to stay humble, to stay grounded, and to respect the natural limits of being human. Now, as we look back on all the stories from this series, we see that they all lead to the same place. Whether it was the flight of Icarus or the songs of Orpheus, these tales were reflections of the human spirit. They are mirrors that show us our own hopes, our own fears, and our own capacity for wonder, even though thousands of years have passed. The way we feel when we look at a sunset or hear a distant roll of thunder hasn't really changed. We are still connected to those ancient people by the same sense of mystery. The world of the myths hasn't really disappeared. It has just moved into the background. It lives on in the names of the planets that wander through the night sky. It lives on in the way we describe our own journeys and our own struggles. Most importantly, it lives on in moments like this, in the quiet of the night, when we let our imaginations wander back to a time when the world was young and full of gods. The fires of the ancient temples have long since gone out, and the marble pillars have weathered under the sun and rain, but the ideas stay. The feeling of being part of a grand, beautiful story remains. The ancients knew that at the end of every day, no matter how much we have accomplished or how far we have traveled, we all return to the same stillness. The stars are very bright tonight, scattered like silver dust across the dark. They are the same stars that the ancient shepherds watched while they sat with their flocks on the hills of Arcadia. Those shepherds are gone, and their songs have faded into the wind, but the stars remain. They remind us that the world is very old and very patient. There is no need to hurry. There is no need to worry about tomorrow. The stories have all been told for now. The echoes of the lyre have drifted away, and the gods have settled back into their long, immortal sleep. The heroes have found their rest in the islands of the blessed, where the sun always shines softly and the grass is always cool. The thread of our story for tonight has reached its end. Looping back into the silence from which it began, the night is a vast, calm ocean, and we are simply drifting on its surface. The air is still. The room is dark. The ancient world is just a memory, a gentle dream that stays with us as we close our eyes. Let the weight of the stories settle into your mind like soft sand at the bottom of a clear lake. There is nothing left to do but breathe and be still. The shadows on the wall are motionless. The distant sounds of the world are fading, leaving only the sound of the quiet. The myths are tucked away now, safe and sound, waiting for the next time we choose to remember them. But for now, they are sleeping, just as the world is sleeping. Everything is quiet. Everything is at peace. The ancient world has said its piece, and the modern world has grown silent to listen. The light of the moon is enough. The stillness of the room is enough. Sleep is coming, as gentle and certain as the tide, washing away the thoughts of the day and leaving only the calm of the night. The embers in the fireplace have turned to a soft, pulsing red, and the shadows in the corners of the room seem to lean in, as if they too are listening. We have traveled far together through the stories of the gods and the deeds of the heroes. We have seen the world through the eyes of the ancients, a world where every tree and every stream held a secret. But tonight, we move toward the quietest part of the journey. We are going to speak about the end of the path, the place of rest, and the unseen hands that guide the thread of every life in the mind of the ancient Greeks. The end of life was not a sudden stop, but a transition into a different kind of stillness. They imagined a realm that existed far beneath the roots of the mountains, a place where the sun never reached, but where a different, softer light glowed. This was the kingdom of Hades. It wasn't a place of punishment or fear, as we often think of it today. Instead, It was a vast, quiet library of souls, a place where the noise of the world finally fell away, leaving only the essence of who a person was. To get there, one had to cross a boundary, a place where the air grew cool and the sound of running water became the only music. They spoke of a river called the Styx, whose waters were dark and ancient. There was a ferryman there, a silent figure who moved his boat through the mist with a single, long oar. There was no splashing, no shouting, just the rhythmic, steady movement of the boat crossing from the shore of the living to the shore of the quiet. It was a passage we all must take, and there was a strange comfort in knowing that the path was well worn by those who had gone before. Once on the other side, the traveler would find themselves in a landscape of gray mists and soft meadows. One of the most beautiful ideas they had was the river Lethe. They believed that before a soul could truly find peace, they would take a drink from these cool, clear waters. As they drank, the memories of their earthly struggles, their heavy worries, and their old regrets would simply dissolve. It was the gift of forgetfulness. Imagine the relief of letting go of every burden you've carried, feeling your mind become as clear and still as a mountain pool. It was the ultimate rest, a way to start the long sleep with a light heart. For most people, the destination was the fields of Az. It wasn't a place of great joy or deep sorrow, but a neutral, peaceful plain where spirits drifted like the petals of the pale flowers that grew there. The air was always at a perfect, lukewarm temperature, and the light was like a permanent twilight. It was a place for those who had lived ordinary lives, who had done their best, and were now entitled to an eternity of quiet reflection. There were no tasks to complete, no clocks to watch, just the endless, gentle rustle of the wind through the gray grass. But for those who had lived with exceptional kindness or bravery, there was a special place called Elysium. This was a land of perpetual spring, where the sun shone with a golden mellow glow. The grass was always green, and the air was filled with the scent of lilies and the song of birds that never tired. It was the reward for a life well lived, a place where heroes could put down their swords and simply enjoy the company of friends under the shade of ancient trees. It was the dream of a perfect afternoon, stretched out forever. The rulers of this realm, Hades and Persephone, were not seen as villains. They were the guardians of the great silence. Hades sat on a throne of dark stone, watching over his kingdom with a steady, impartial gaze. He was the host who welcomed everyone eventually, the one who made sure the balance of the world remained intact. Beside him sat Persephone, who brought with her the memory of the world above. For half the year, she lived in the light, and for the other half, she brought her grace to the shadows. Because of her, the underworld was not a place of absolute darkness, but a place that understood the cycle of life and the beauty of returning home above this realm, governing both the gods and the mortals. Were the three sisters known as the Fates. They sat in a hidden place, far beyond the reach of any map. One sister would spin the thread of a life, pulling it from the formless wool and turning it into something strong and distinct. The second sister would measure the thread, determining how long it would be and what patterns it would take. The third sister, the most silent of them all, would eventually cut the thread with her silver shears. There is something very calming about the idea of the Fates. It suggests that our lives are not chaotic or random. There is a rhythm to it, a design that was decided long ago. Even when the world feels unpredictable, the ancients believed that the thread was being held by steady hands. It allowed them to let go of the need to control everything, to trust that their part of the weaving was exactly as it was meant to be. The myths of the Greeks have lasted for thousands of years because they speak to the parts of us that never change. We still look at the stars and feel small. We still look at the changing seasons and feel a sense of wonder. We still look toward the night and hope for a peaceful rest. These stories were their way of whispering into the dark, telling themselves that everything would be all right. They turned the mystery of the afterlife into a landscape we could walk through, and they turned the heavy hand of destiny into a beautiful, spinning thread. As we reach the end of this journey, we can see that all these myths, from the high peaks of Olympus to the deep meadows of the underworld, like a blanket wrapped around the human experience, they provide warmth, they provide context, and they provide a way to understand the silence. The world of the Greeks was a world that was never truly lonely, because every corner of it was filled with story and spirit. The air in your room is still now, and the night has reached its deepest point. The stories have served their purpose. They have carried us across the sea, through the mountains, and into the quiet places of the soul. The ferryman has completed his crossing. The fates have put down their shears for the night, and the thread of the day has been neatly tucked away. The world of the ancients is not gone. It is simply waiting in the shadows of our dreams. It is in the way the moon reflects on the water, and the way the wind sighs through the leaves. It is a part of the deep, collective memory of humanity. A long and gentle song that has been sung for generations. Now, it is time to let the myths fade. Let the images of golden thrones and silver rivers dissolve into the dark. The gods are sleeping. The heroes have found their peace. The rivers of the underworld are flowing silently, carrying away the last of the day's thoughts. There is nothing left to hold on to, nothing left to wonder about. The stories are finished, and the silence that remains is kind and welcoming. The darkness is not a void, but a soft, velvet curtain. Behind it, the stars continue their slow, ancient dance, untroubled and eternal. You are part of that same vast, quiet universe. You are safe. You are at rest. The long sleep of the world is here, and you can join it now. Drifting slowly toward the shore where the dreams begin. The light has gone out. The fire is cold. The night is complete. Everything is as it was always meant to be. Peace is the only thing that remains.